Welcome to part 18 of this video series. Today I'm going to be discussing the different methods you can use to steer your small liveaboard boat. And a special thanks to those who have already subscribed to my channel. And thank you for supporting the creation of this video series. If you haven't done so already, then please remember to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you don't miss any future videos in this series. I'm not going to get into the techniques of handling a boat because that's an entire video series in itself, which I also plan on doing in the future. So to start with, I'll be discussing the different types of wheel or tiller steering, and I'll get into multi-engine and thrusters later on in this video. Okay, so unless your boat is just a floating cabin and gets towed from one location to another, it will have some sort of steering. For the most part, this is done in either one of two ways, either with a steering wheel or with a tiller. I'm going to start by talking about tillers. Rarely do you find tillers on liveaboard power boats, usually they're just on sailboats in this size range. But having said that, my last little liveaboard, which was powered, did have a tiller. I'll also include a link to it in the description below. I'm currently in the process of refitting a larger but still considered small liveaboard boat, and I'll also create a video for that when I complete it. Tillers are by far the easiest and by far the most reliable way to steer. For a small cockpit, which most small liveaboards have, it will make the most sense. Having said that, everybody has their own preferences. I personally prefer a tiller because of its reliability, and in most cases you can tilt it up and have it completely out of the way when it's not in use. Another nice feature is in some cases you can mount a tiller extension to it, which makes it so you can reach the tiller from anywhere in the cockpit. The downsides are it could take a bit more force to control if it's under a heavy load, and you don't have a pedestal to mount the controls, gauges, tables, or even a drink holder to. However, you can normally find other ways around the cockpit to mount these things. Also, some people find it counterintuitive to use since you move the tiller in the opposite direction that you plan on turning. Tillers can control both motors and rudders, in some cases both simultaneously. I sailed a trimaran sailboat for a gentleman back in the early 90s that had it set up so he just had a small crank that quickly dropped his outboard into the water with just a few turns. The outboard was connected to a track on the rudder, so when you turn the tiller, it controlled both the tiller and the motor. Some tillers can be directly attached to the rudder, or via pull cables, chains, Morse cables, or hydraulics connected to rudders or engines, although you rarely see hydraulics set up on the smaller boats. Now, using a wheel to steer has its advantages. A lot of people find it a more natural way to steer, especially since it's more like driving a car, and some believe it to be a more accurate way of steering. Again, wheels can be used to control both tillers and motors. Some are mounted on pedestals in the middle of the cockpit, and some are mounted on a bulkhead. As I have mentioned before, wheel steering usually has the advantage of giving more space to mount the motor controls, gauges, etc. right there. The two downfalls of steering with a wheel is when they're not in use, they can end up in the way, using valuable space in a small cockpit. If it is mounted on a pedestal, then you have that in the cockpit as well. Now, there has been some attempts to fix this problem by either using folding wheels or removable wheels. These are both solutions for larger wheels, like you would find on a sailboat. Smaller wheels are less of a problem. The second downfall is, in most cases, they require more mechanics to operate and therefore are less reliable. Although having said that, most systems are fairly simple and easy enough for their owners to repair themselves. Although unlike tillers, they cannot be directly connected to a rudder, but they can be connected via pulled cables, chains, Morse cables, or hydraulics. The difference between the most common type of mechanisms is pull cables you usually see on older boats. This is just a series of cables and pulleys. These are the simplest to repair, but are the least reliable and give you the most play. Having said that, I used one for years and never had an issue. The second is the most common type on powerboats, and that is the Morse type cables. These are a type of push-pull cable. These connect either a rotary or rack and pinion helms. Basically, as you turn the wheel, it either pushes your motor or tiller one way, and when you rotate the wheel the other way, it pulls your motor or tiller the other way. The last of the common options is hydraulic. These are without a doubt the most expensive systems and rarely seen on small boats, especially in North America. These are similar to Morse type push-pull cables, except for it uses hose filled with oil instead, just like any hydraulic cylinder. One other thing I should mention is steer-by-wire. This uses an actuator on the motor and electricity to control it. These are still very rare as a main form of steering on small liveaboard boats. You usually only see it on ships, but you're now starting to see it popular for trolling motors for fishermen out there. When it comes to wheel size, the only determining factors on which size you need are first torque. The larger the wheel, the more torque it gives you for turning the motor or tiller. You'll find small power boats don't need that much torque to control, so they always have smaller wheels similar to a car. And the second factor is aesthetics. What size looks best on your boat? Now, on a side note, I should mention a lot of small boats can easily be converted from either a tiller to a wheel or vice versa. A thruster is a simple propulsive device located at the bow and or stern, bow being far more popular. It then provides sideways thrust, making the boat a lot more maneuverable. Rarely do you see these on small liveaboard boats, but new options that allow them to be mounted externally is allowing owners to retrofit them, and they're making them much more popular. The benefits of having thrusters are many, particularly for boaters who must routinely deal with gusty winds, strong currents, or crowded dock spaces. Maneuvering in tight areas is much easier as the thruster allows the operator to turn the boat without any forward motion. This is particularly helpful with high windage boats. The cons of these are they can be very, very expensive, they can create some drag when underway, and some old-timers consider it cheating. Personally, I say, if you can afford it and you can mount it, it is worth the investment. Twin-engine boats provide more maneuvering control than a single-engine boat because of the ability to push or pull from both corners at the stern. This helps with maneuvering in a straight line, performing standing turns, or making small directional changes with a single thrust, all without using the wheel. However, you usually only find twin engines on high-speed boats, which I mentioned in an earlier video is not the best setup for a small liveaboard boat. One more type of steering a boat is a new method where the motors are located in turning pods mounted below the boat. These have the great advantage in the fact that they can rotate 360 degrees. However, I have personally never seen one that isn't fixed for smaller boats. In fact, if you know of one, please add a link to it in the comments below. In closing, whether you use a simple or complex system, there are a lot of options from fairly cheap to extremely expensive. Simpler systems cost less, whereas the more complex systems can reduce things like feedback from your engine or tiller. All you can do is figure out what will work best for your situation, do the research, and look at the different options, and figure out what would work best for you. If I missed any types, or if you have any thoughts or ideas about this subject or ideas for future subjects that I have not covered, please let me know in the comments below. I always love hearing from you. And thanks again for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video series on living aboard a small boat. If you have, then please subscribe so you don't miss any future videos. Also, I included a link to all the past videos in the description below.